Welcome, everyone. I'm Marla Miller from marlamiller.com, and I'm presenting another Marla Miller Talks to Authors and Content Creators. Um, this is a beta version of what I hope will become a podcast that attracts writers and content creators, because as you all know, if you didn't, there's a lot of us out here. And last year alone, 4 million books were sold. 4 million. To give a context, when I entered writing, when I was entering my midlife and I entered the writing profession in 1990, 100 to 125 books maximum were published a year. So between 125 to 4 million, it's a lot of writers, and we need to support each other because I always say writing a story is the easy part. Selling it is a whole nother kettle of fish. And so this podcast is aimed at those of us who came into the writing life in midlife. In other words, we had other careers before we shifted to the writing life. And most of us have a hand in our former as well as our current because we have to in order to pay bills. It's just the reality of the writing life. And frankly, it's always been like that. I know that people think, oh gosh, I'm going to write a novel and I'm going to become a bestseller and, I'll be on Easy Street. It just doesn't happen. It never really has. It only, as Barney Conrad said during one of the Santa Barbara Writers Conferences that I attended in the 90s, he said there were 400 of us in the audience. And he said, okay, look around. It was the first day of the conference. He said, okay, look around. And there's 400 of you. And out of and that's the good news because you're here learning. The bad news is that out of the 400, maybe 1 to 3 will get contracts from New York. So it's always been tough. I'm not sure that it's been as tough as it is now, but be that as it may, I'm here today with an author who has been incredibly prolific in the last 5 years. Dennis K. Crosby hails from San Diego. I met him at the Southern California Writers Conference where we both teach workshops. I don't read much horror, and he was offering a workshop, and I was literally walking by, and I heard something that attracted my attention. I walked in, I crept in the back, and I listened to him, and I went, oh, yeah, horror is, that may be the backdrop, that may be the setting, but it's character driven. It's about people or whatever people they create in their genre. And you and another writer who I've also interviewed, and he's from the Santa Barbara Writers Conference. Um, I read one of his, and his was sci-fi. I mean, really sci-fi. And again, I said to Rick, "Oh, okay. I can relate to these people." And so
Mhm.
with that, I want to give people just a bit of a bio, if I may, on Dennis. As I said, he comes from the behavioral sciences profession. He has taught at the college level. He works in the nonprofit sector in San Diego. Um, I believe now he's segueing to another job in order to, just pay bills. And if you're going to do that if you're going to work outside of writing stories, I can't think of a better place to hang out than in the nonprofit sector because, boy, we need help. You know, we need
Definitely.
help. And so I could go on and say, his master's degree and all of that. I won't. Instead, I want to read and you'll have to excuse me because I'm I'm on my iPhone, and those of you who know me know that. Hold on, hold on, just a sec. Okay, so Dennis has 3 books out now. It's a series. The first one is called Death's Legacy. The second, Death's Debt, and the third, Death's Despair. You like D's? And so let me give you an overview. His series are urban fantasy supernatural thrillers that bring magic and mythology into the real world. They are a culmination of my love of Greek mythology, my fear of death, and my studies in psychology, as each book looks at my main character's understanding and acceptance of who she is and ultimately who she needs to be. Book one was published in 2020, book two in 2021, and book three in 2023. Dennis is currently working on the fourth book in the series. In the meantime, he's had 19 short stories published, with 20, 21, and 22 coming over the next few months. Welcome to Marla Miller Talks to Authors and Content Creators, Dennis Crosby. Where the hell do you find the time?
Well, first, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for the invite. Um, as far as the time, I mean, I was watching I think it was an interview with Tananarive Due, and she was talking about, she's a professor at UCLA. She teaches there. She writes. I mean, she's just amazing, and she talks about finding the time. And one of the things she said that I really love, she uses this phrase called writing in the margins.
Ah,
So you're writing when you can. You
yeah.
got a lunch break, you got a 10-minute break. You're sitting in a car waiting for somebody while you're picking them up at the airport, and you jot some notes down, or you
Hmm.
make a recording about something that's on your mind. You find those little moments to try to put some things together. And then I think over time you just kind of figure out which portions of the day really work for you. Like, I know I'm not a morning person, so
Okay.
I got a lot of friends who are getting up at like 4 or 5 in the morning
Me.
and they're writing for a couple hours before
Yeah.
they go to work.
Yeah.
That'll never be me.
I hear
I'm
you.
not a morning person.
Yeah.
I can work after work hours, provided it wasn't like a truly stressful day.
Yeah.
Um, and I tend to write, depending on what I'm writing, it's very rare that I write at home. It's usually like at a coffee shop. I'm kind of that
Is that
cliche. So
right?
yeah, we got a place in San Diego called the Stats. There's actually three locations. And so Lestat's Coffee House, they've got great coffee, tea, they got snacks. It's a pretty open atmosphere.
Yeah.
And I can write there. And even though there's people talking and having meetings and whatever, I don't get really distracted. I just like I can kind of tune in and get some stuff done for a few hours. So
That's always amazing to me that people can write. I think of a mutual friend of ours, Gail Carline, can go to a
mhm,
coffee shop and she can write. And
yeah.
I just, it's amazing to me that people can because for me, Dennis, writing story is difficult. It's always been difficult, not nonfiction, fiction.
Yeah.
Um, and and so I circle the desk a lot,
Hmm.
before I put my butt down to write. And I've always been like that. But if I have distractions, I'm a little ADHD,
Hmm.
it's like, oh, look at that. Oh, look at, so that's no good for me, but it's been successful for you because in 5 years, you've written three novels and published them. Kudos to you. That's terrific. I want to talk about, uh,
Yeah.
first of all, you have a female protagonist, and so
Hmm.
I'm nosy, Dennis. I need to know how that evolved in your storytelling.
Yeah.
And also, if you can, during the course of our exchange, if you can talk about how your professional life before you became an author has informed the themes, maybe even the characters, the plot of
Hmm.
of your fictional writing. So take it away. Tell me about when you decided to write your first novel.
Um, that's a long answer.
We've got
So
time.
I grew up as a kind of a creative kid. I mean, my mind was always everywhere. Um, I grew up watching, Star Trek and reading comic books and loving sci-fi and fantasy. But I also grew up watching Taxi and MASH, and like
Mhm.
all of these. Like I'm just this kind of pop culture person.
Mhm.
When I was maybe, I think it was 8 or 9, I saw Clash of the Titans for the first time,
Mhm.
the original with Harry Hamlin and Laurence Olivier. I saw that movie once over the course of one summer, 22 times.
Did
Every
you?
time it was on
Wow.
cable, I watched that movie, and I fell in love with the genre. I fell
Yep.
in love with these stories of Greek mythology. And it was also around that same time that my mother's best friends had come back from their honeymoon. They'd gone to Greece, and they brought
Mhm.
me back this giant illustrated book of Greek myths. And I read
Mhm.
that thing cover to cover, I mean, throughout the course of my childhood. And
Really?
so, yeah, and I've always had this love of just fantasy and the what ifs.
Mhm.
And that stuck with me throughout my childhood, into my teens and my adult years. If it's got something to do with magic or immortality or whatever, I'm probably going to be the one watching it, reading it, checking it out, and if it's good, I'm gonna support it. I'm gonna love it probably.
Interesting. Let
Um,
me, if you don't mind, let me,
yeah.
when you said what if, I had the pleasure of interviewing Mary Higgins Clark years ago when I
Hmm.
was a columnist, yeah, in Newport. And someone in the audience, she was pitching a book, one of her
Yeah.
gazillion, and someone in the audience said, how do you write? How do you start it? And she said, it's very simple. This from a master craftswoman. She said, you ask two questions. What if, whatever that is,
Hmm.
dot, 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 then what?
Hmm.
And you're off and running.
Exactly.
And I never forgot that. And I thought, boy, to distill it down into that kind of simple equation. Of course, there's so much more than that into
Yeah.
writing long
But you got to have a
fiction.
place to start.
You got to have a place to start. So that was
Yeah.
really interesting that you said that. So that kind of set the foundation for your interest in the genres that you have incorporated into your storytelling. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, I mean that was always there. It was always the foundation of it. When I
Hmm.
first announced that I wanted to write a book, I just finished my undergraduate degree.
Hmm.
I got a degree in criminal justice. My plan was to go into law enforcement. I had a
Wow.
whole career set, 25 years as law enforcement, retire, open a
Hmm.
PI firm, work another 10, 15 years, open a bar, and just like chill.
Sounds good.
Uh, that was my life goal.
Yeah, yeah. Not bad.
And at some point, I was out with some friends and I announced to them I was going to write a book. And I started writing it like a year later. And this is 99, 2000.
Okay.
And then I realized I don't know how to write a book. I'd always been good at writing in school. I
Yeah.
got A's on everything that I did creative writing. I was very cocky as a writer. Um, but then I realized I didn't know anything about this craft. And so I stepped away from it for a while. I started writing poetry a lot, thinking I would get into like this whole slam poetry thing.
Yeah, it was big in the early
Oh, it's huge,
2000s, right?
huge. And especially in Chicago, it's a place called the Green Mill. It's
Okay.
a bar, a lounge.
Hmm.
It's up on the north side. It's on Lawrence Avenue. And I'm blanking on the cross street right now, but I love this place. It's a jazz lounge, but like once a week they had poetry slams going on.
Yep.
And I would go and listen to these people perform. And I'm like, one day I'm going to get up there. One day I'm going to do it. And I think, over the course of the next few years, I wrote probably 60, 75 poems and I never performed anything.
Do you know
I
why?
had, I had stage fright,
Yeah. Yeah.
stage fright and a fear of like sharing that part of me. Like
Sure.
everything was so personal. I just
As
kind of
poetry is.
kept it in. Exactly. Exactly.
Hmm.
And so once I got through all of that, I decided to kind of go back to long form again. And this time I wanted to take it seriously. So I started taking workshops and really kind of learning the craft,
Hmm.
learning the difference between the craft of writing and the business of publishing. And that was huge for me. And it became like a real solid cornerstone once I left Chicago and moved to San Diego, found like this whole writing community. It's very robust here and
Sure is.
it
Yeah.
crosses genres. It's not just there's a section of memoirs, there's a section of speculative fiction writers. There's horror, there's sci-fi, there's western, there's everything here, but they're all welcoming, right? They'll all kind of take you under their wing and tell you where to go. They'll tell you about this event, tell you about that. And so I think I really grew as a writer once I got here and started just learning more about the community, the business, the craft.
Mhm.
Um, and so once I started writing this book, I was able to kind of put all those things together. My love of mythology and magic and fantasy into everything I learned about the craft itself
Mhm.
and how to shape the story, how to create this character, how to tell her story in a way that honored her, but also honored the journey that she was on without cheating the reader, without putting cliche in it, without putting,
Mhm.
the stereotypes in there. Being authentic in that story as much as possible so that people can actually connect to it. All of that happened because of the things that I, learned and read as a kid and, up through my adult life, and then was able to kind of blend once I moved here. Um, and
Interesting.
without that, it wouldn't have been, it would not have been fun. It wouldn't have been good for sure.
I
But
think what
the
you're
journey was fun.
I think that what you're saying is so important because you can know how to spin words. You
Hmm.
can write, for your profession in your professional life, you can be a solid writer. People in your in your workplace can say, yeah, go to Dennis or go to because they'll be able to clean that up for you. I mean, that's all
Yep.
wonderful. That's all
Yep.
terrific. But I just had this happen to me. And I want to share it here because I think that it has value, especially in our 21st century learning mode. Writers have taken to social media to learn craft. And I've sensed this for a long time. But I posted something about, I'm always preaching about going to writers' conferences, going to
Hmm.
writers' workshops,
Yep.
going to read and critique workshops to get your stories vetted. I'm always doing that because as an editor, I get manuscripts from people that are missing craft.
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
they're just missing craft. And one gal on one of the Facebook pages that I am on and I really like, it's women editors, authors, agents, and publishers, and it's for women only. She said, I attended my first writers' conference, and she had, I think, published maybe a book already. She said, last weekend I attended my first writers' conference, and it was there that I realized how much I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so I said, where are you getting where are you learning your craft? And she was very honest, and she said, on social media.
Hmm.
And I went, ay, 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 ay. That explains a lot. And so I'm really glad to hear you say that, if you want to write stories that sell and get good reviews, as your stories do, because I checked them out, you got to know craft. You got to
You
know
gotta know.
the
Yeah.
back end of this story that you're sharing with the world. And
Hmm.
I think, and I'm maybe a little bit biased, I think that if we don't do that at the undergraduate level, if we don't go out of, graduate from undergrad and then go into the MFA program, um, we have to figure out ways to at least be competitive because those writers know craft.
Absolutely.
And those books, if they're not too ponderous, and some of them um, are going to get the attention. So those of us who have entered the writing life later really have to catch up. And I will tell you that when I moved here, the University of California in Irvine had an incredible writing program. They still do, but they had for adult learners. And I
Yeah.
took for over 2 years, I took every damn workshop I could and met my mentors there who then introduced me to the Santa Barbara Writers Conference. I wouldn't have had any of that if I hadn't stepped outside of myself. And like you, Dennis, I always thought I was a pretty good writer, so what do I need to
I could
learn, you
I
know?
could string words together and I could make
Right.
an essay, I could make an essay pop. I
Me
wrote it.
too.
I've told the story before to people. When I was in high school, I wrote a paper for English. The topic was on fate and fatalism and this belief that things are set in stone and there's nothing that you can really do to change it and
Hmm.
blah, blah, blah. So I took the side that I believe in it, right? I believe in fate. I believe that things are kind of etched. We're just kind of going through the motions until we get to this inevitability.
Hmm.
My paper was 2 weeks late and I turned it in, and the very last sentence was, I believe in fatalism so much that I know that even though this paper is 2 weeks late, I'm going to get an A on it. I swear to God.
And did you?
I got it. I got it back the next day, and she gave me an A minus
Because it was late.
because it was late. But she said, you this is the cockiest paper I've ever read in my
Yeah.
life. But the way that you wrote it, the things that you put together, it was fantastic. And I that just kind of like fed this monster that said, I can fix anything with my writing.
Hmm.
I can do anything with my writing, and I can be creative, and I can put things together. But you're right in the sense that if you don't know how to do it for a longer form,
Hmm.
you're going to struggle. You're going to find yourself, just kind of wallowing. And that very first book that I tried to write, it was a vampire novel,
Hmm.
and it essentially became a diary entry for everything I was going through that day
Interesting. Yeah. Hmm.
because I had no clue how to craft this story. I had no clue about character development. I didn't know what a three-act structure was.
Hmm.
I didn't know anything about how to just kind of put this thing from start to finish. It was about a vampire, a guy who worked at Home Depot where I had happened to work at the time,
Hmm.
who had to switch from the day shift to the night shift because he couldn't stand the sun. I mean, it was ridiculous. It's a
Hmm.
great premise at the time, but once I finally learned the craft and learned the rules,
Yeah.
and rules change, but you got to know what the rules are so that you know what you can play with
That's
later on.
exactly. I mean, I think Hemingway said that, you don't break the rules until you learn them. And
Exactly.
whoever said it, everyone says Hemingway said everything. But I know enough about him to, he likely said that. I want to talk
Hmm.
about two things. One about the arrogance of writers, because it is just part of our DNA. I think that if you have the belief that you can write long form that is going to be 300 pages, you got to be a little arrogant. You got to have a little bit in you.
I mean, I don't know. I was arrogant younger. I think once I realized how much I didn't know,
Yeah.
I set that aside. And everything that I've done since I really got into this writing community, and we're talking, 2012 till today,
Yeah.
um, I go in believing I know nothing. I've taken workshops multiple times because each time I get something different out of it.
I have too. Yep.
Um, the workshops, even that I teach, sometimes will shift because new information comes in or
Yeah,
something
sure.
changes in the field. So you got to be able to adapt, and you can't what I've learned the most is that you can't come in thinking that you know everything. I've met a lot of writers that think that and that kind of operate in that way, and they're not all that well received. And I'm not
I've
even
got
talking their work. I'm talking about personally.
Yeah, I hear you. And what I say in my workshops, and I learned this from mentors of mine, is that personalities of writers, I think that we share some things. We have some things in common. And the way that it was explained to me was that, on one shoulder, we've got this angel whispering that you are the best. Nobody can tell a story like you. On the other shoulder, we've got a devil-like figure that's saying, "Are you kidding me? I mean, come on. Who do you
Yeah.
think you are?" I got some humble pie delivered to me when I was still in my arrogant phase, when I came into writing in 1990, I had applied for a position. My instructor at UCI said, package these up. You'll be able to get a byline with these. And so I did. And he told me four small, newspapers, throwaways that I should pitch to. And so I did, and I got accepted. And she called me. This was before the internet, and she called me and she said, "Really like it." It was lifestyle,
Yeah.
and I had my kids were all babies back then, and she said, "I really like it, except your columns need to be cut." And I went, "Cut?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, they've already been vetted by my instructor." And she said, "Yeah, I know, but your instructor isn't publishing a newspaper, and we only have this much room. So if you
Yeah.
can't cut these by 200 words, they were 850 words. I'm like, 200 words for each column?" And I said, "Frankly, I think they're as tight as they can be." And you know what she said? She said, "Okay, well, then I can't offer you the position." And I went, "Wait a minute."
Wow. Yeah. I'll find a way.
And I said, when do you need it?" And she said, "Tomorrow morning." And it was two
Yeah.
communities away from where I was living. And I had a brand new baby,
Mhm.
who I was still nursing. And I'll be damned, I stayed up, for most of that night and delivered it with baby in tow, and got the
Exactly.
job. And so I don't think that my concern is that writers aren't going through the paces in today's world as we had to do back then. And I'm not saying that everything from back then was better than it is today, but I do think
Mhm.
that writers got a lot more instruction and guidance, because if you're pitching to a magazine, you have to assume that those people know more than you do,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. And I go into, every conference I go to, every workshop I go into, I go in, you have to go in with an open mind. If
Mhm.
you're going in thinking that you know everything, then there's no point in you even being
Exactly.
there. And so I go in ready to learn, to ask questions, to find
Hmm.
out the things that certainly might appeal to what I'm working on currently, but something that is going to hopefully expand my knowledge about
Hmm.
either that subject or my own process. And if I can't do that, then I need to find the workshop that really works for me. Doesn't mean that that workshop's not good. This means I don't need that right now in my career, or I don't need it
Hmm.
at that moment for whatever project I'm on. And so, without that open mind, without thinking, without realizing that you don't know everything, um, you'll struggle. You'll struggle. You'll take you'll not so much that easy road, but you'll take the road that looks easy, that looks like, well, they're doing it, so why can't I do it?
Hmm.
You know. And again, I credit it with moving here. When I first got here in San Diego, I started going to this group called the Writers Coffee House,
Hmm.
which is it's a monthly meeting that's held here in San Diego at a local bookstore, led by Jonathan Mayberry, and we talk about the craft. We talk about the craft of writing. We talk about the business of publishing. And
Hmm.
I've been going to that meeting since its very first meeting back in
Good.
2015.
Yeah.
And that also helped me kind of blend my knowledge of craft and business and realizing that they are two separate things, but two separate things I need to learn a lot about.
You betcha.
You can't master it because they change all the time, but you need to understand it and you need
Yep.
to respect it. You need to respect the fact that you're never going to know everything, but you'll know enough to keep going, and you'll know enough that you realize you have to keep learning about it every day.
Yeah, and I think that master crafts people always say that they're always learning. I mean, I've heard,
Exactly.
I've heard Jody Picoult say that. I've heard many of them say that.
Hmm.
I want to shift a little bit because I'm watching the time and I don't like to make these too long, but two things.
Yeah.
I want to know how you decided to uh, select a female protagonist. And then I also want to know about the theme of death,
Yeah.
that because that theme is also uh, it's central to my writing as well. So I just want to I'm nosy. I want to know. So tell me about your protagonist first, if you would.
Well, this book, these books, this character, Cassidy Simmons, she
Mhm.
was She was born during the time that I was in my MFA program. I was taking a screenwriting workshop,
Oh, okay.
and we were tasked with coming up with three log lines. And the log line that we liked the best would then be the script that we would work on throughout that course.
Okay.
And so I came up with this log line that said, after 20 years on the run, Cassidy Simmons has to return home to confront the man who killed her.
Oh,
I liked it so much that I forgot what the other two log lines were, but I shared
oh,
three
that's
of
a
them.
winner.
Yeah, I shared them with everybody. I shared them with my son, with my mom, with my friends, like people I knew that just kind of enjoyed reading.
Yeah.
Um, and they liked that one the best. And so that became the script that I worked on. And I learned two things. One, writing the script is hard,
Hmm.
and my hat is off to anyone that can do it. I did well in the course. I took screenwriting one and two, did well in both. The script came out okay,
Hmm.
but there wasn't enough in there. Like I loved this story and this character so much, I decided to shift my thesis, and I created Death's Legacy. That was my master's thesis, and I chose her because it was just the character that spoke to me. It wasn't
Yeah.
something that I went in saying I'm going to write a story about a woman. It
Yeah.
was
You heard
I do
her.
this thing. Yeah, exactly. I do this
Yeah.
thing where I
Yeah.
interview characters, right? If I have a character in mind, I interview them. This one I didn't have in mind at the time, but I started writing these questions down and I answered them as if I was the character. And that's how it just kind of laid out.
That's
My
great.
name is Cassidy. I'm a PI. I'm a former PI. So she's, a lot of my characters are private investigators. Um, she said I specialize in locating people. I'm an empath. It doesn't mean that I can like sense people. I can actually feel what they're feeling. And so we kind of dove into that a bit. And then she said, and I have this thing where I'm a reaper and I escort souls through the afterlife.
Wow.
And I started just kind of moving with that story in mind
Creating
with
that
that.
world.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And a lot of that is based on this fact that I have, I don't know if it's irrational, but I have a fear of death, and it's been there since I was a kid.
Okay.
And it's not so much that I fear dying; it's that I fear my physical body like being dead, but my mind's still working
Oh,
and like being trapped in this
that's
body.
scary.
Exactly,
Oh,
exactly.
yeah. You got my attention. Yeah.
And so, when she's telling me she's a reaper of souls, and the idea of being a reaper is that she's escorting these souls. Like there's this recognition in these novels that yeah, the body's dead, but there's more. There's more
Hmm.
to us than that. And
Hmm.
it's her job, or was her job, to help those folks realize that and be okay, to feel at peace as they go from this life to the next life.
So can I assume or posit that this has been a therapeutic experience for you personally?
In some regard, yeah. I mean,
Hmm.
there's certainly a
Getting
lot.
closer to.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
With writers, we write so much, and I think a lot of what we write, we're in control of it to some degree.
Yeah.
Sometimes the story takes over and it has to be told a certain way, but there's a bit of control in how we write something or what we decide to write. And I think that control kind of helps us, understand ourselves a little bit more.
Absolutely.
We kind of dig into the subject a bit. And so we're able to kind of put
Absolutely.
these things together. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it has been. It's also been a way for me. You'd asked earlier about how kind of my professional life seeps in. Like I already mentioned, a lot of my
PI.
characters
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
PIs. But once I transitioned from that world into social service, into behavioral health, Cassidy is also a bit of an addict.
Okay.
She acknowledges that she is.
Hmm.
She's kind of in the way James Bond is an alcoholic.
Okay.
He drinks, but he still gets the job done. That
Gets the
was her
job
for
done.
a very
Yeah.
long time.
Okay.
And it was really about her trying to understand and process the trauma that she'd experienced as a kid, being bullied, being teased, I was bullied as a kid. I was teased as a kid.
Yeah.
And so we kind of go through that with her and see where she's come and how far she's evolved
Yeah.
from being, what they called her as a kid was Crazy Cassie. And now she's gone from Crazy Cassie to Reaper of Souls to the Goddess of Death. And we just follow that journey and try
Yeah.
to get her to a point where she can reconcile who she is, acknowledge what she's gone through, but recognize that that doesn't define who she is now. She actually has a very pivotal role in her life, for her life, but for the people around her and for the world at large too.
Fascinating. And this character has so much volume, so much depth, so many layers that you see another book coming.
Yeah, yeah. The first book kind of laid the
Fascinating.
foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tell people that the first book was kind of again laying that foundation. The second book was more like Star Wars,
Mm-hmm.
and the third book is kind of my Empire Strikes Back,
Got it.
where the bad guys win. And then the third book is my Return of the Jedi. So
Okay.
Cassie's coming back. She's coming back stronger than ever, and she's got to, set some things right and make these bad guys realize that, you don't get to be in charge today.
Fascinating. I could sit here and talk to you for quite a while, Dennis. But I know from experience that I want people to listen to this. I want writers to listen to this because
Yeah,
we're offering, I think, useful information that hopefully will be helpful. However, people don't like really long videos. And so I try and keep mine to the 30 minute, and we're at the 30
absolutely.
minute. And so I'm going to end this interview, but I want to let you know that when your next book comes out, if you want to come back on and talk, I would love that. Meanwhile, I will be posting this, in all the usual places, and I hope that you do too.
Absolutely.
And this was fun. I really appreciated talking to you about craft because craft is, writers out there, you got to learn it. I'm
You
sorry.
do.
You
You
might have a
do.
great imagination and you might be able to twirl words, but without craft, that thing is just going to get stuck. And
The,
you'll
the
either
one
leave
thing,
it, you'll walk away from it, or
yep,
you'll continue with this murky
mhm,
story that you might even think is publishable, and then it will just sit there. And
forever.
right? And so I think that if this podcast has any utility, I hope it will be to give writers the messages that, first of all, you can start writing at any time of your life.
Absolutely.
And you bring your experiences with you, and they get rooted into your storytelling. They just do. And they take on all different forms, as yours have.
Yep.
I'm romance fantasy, your horror, metaphysical, but the roots are in your real life. And I think that if you're going to tell a story that has any resonance to the larger community, we don't all have the same set of personality. We
Mhm.
don't have we're not all the same, but we relate to certain themes in life.
Exactly. And that common thread, I think, is what connects writers and readers.
I totally
I've
agree.
gotten emails from people. My character's not only female, she's bisexual. And so I've had a lot of females that say, "Thank you so much for not trivializing her sexuality. Thank you
Yeah.
for not like digging into that. Thank you for showing that there's more to her than just that." And I think
Hmm.
it's important. You have to. It's about the character, right? The most important thing about the character should not be their gender, their sexual orientation. It should, unless that's what the story is about.
Yeah.
In this case, that's not what the story is. That's a part of who she is. And I tell people all the time, I could not have written this 20 years ago.
Right. Right.
You know, when I decided I wanted to be a writer,
Yeah.
this wasn't going to be able to come out. I had to go through and experience life. I had to go through and realize I didn't know what I was doing and
Yep.
take these workshops and learn from these experts. And and continue to learn.
Yeah,
So without that, you're gonna have a difficult time. So make part of your writing journey learning every day
learning.
about something a little different.
And of course, reading authors that you love because,
Yes.
picking up a book, one of my favorite authors is Jodi Picoult. I've spent the last 7 months reading 6 of her novels, and they're this
Hmm.
thick.
Yeah.
But man, I could never, ever reach her height. But she inspires me,
Exactly.
right? And
Exactly.
that's why writers read. And with that, I'm going to say adios. And thank you very much for your time, Dennis. Would you just end it with the titles of your 3 books in the series, please?
Absolutely. First book is called Death's Legacy.
Mhm.
Second book is Death's Debt. And the third book is Death's Despair.
Okay,
And I'm working on book 4 right now, which is Death's Reckoning.
cool. And where can listeners find these books to buy?
I mean, everywhere.
Okay,
Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can order them from your local bookstore, which I would absolutely love for you to
I
do.
know. I tell people
Go
that
to
too. Yeah.
Yeah, go to IndieBound, look up your local bookstore, and you can order it through them. The first 2 books are available on audio. All the books are available as ebook as well. So you can get them anywhere.
Do you do your own audiobooks?
No,
Okay.
no, 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 no.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
get someone
because
far more skilled.
well, I was thinking of it and I went, no,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. But you have a very modulated voice, and I thought, well, maybe he does that. I'm too uh, ethnic. I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that. Dennis Crosby, it was my pleasure. Thank you for coming on Marla Miller Talks to authors and content creators.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate being here.
My pleasure. Bye.